All in favor?
Hi.
Aye. Consideration of minutes of the DRB meeting of August 18th, 22. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Yes, that.
You and Michelle, you want,
Oh, yeah, second, sorry.
all in favor? Aye.
Excited about that training.
All right. Okay, this is a public hearing consideration of DRB 2217, Cannon Beach Conference Center application for the replacement of exterior siding. Guy Williams, applicant on behalf of Cannon Beach Conference Center for the replacement of exterior siding. The property is owned by the Cannon Beach Conference Center and located at 387 Fur. In a limited commercial zone, the application will be reviewed against the criteria of municipal code. Chapter 17.440-417.44-100 design review criteria. This is a quasi judicial hearing. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the DRB to hear the matter at this time? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest or personal bias? Has any commission member had any ex parte contact or made a site visit?
The site visit.
Site visit. Okay. Do we have the staff report?
Yes. The proposed project includes a replacement of cedar shake siding with horizontal siding on the north and south face of the River House building at the Cannon Beach Conference Center. The application includes an alternative plan using a paneled shake style siding similar to that completed kitchen dining building. Although color is not mentioned in the application, it is assumed that the new siding would be painted in a manner consistent with other buildings on the campus. The proposal does not include any structural modifications that would change the overall shape and form of the River House. The most applicable items from the architectural design criteria are item number C. Proposed materials and colors are compatible with character and coastal setting of the city. And D, that the design avoids monotony and provides visual interest and charm by giving sufficient attention to architectural details such as design elements as texture, pattern, and color.
Okay.
And we have Mr. Williams on with us as well.
He's
Yes,
on.
I'm here.
Okay. All right. Any additional correspondence?
No.
Okay. Pertinent criteria to be considered and noted in the staff reports and listed on the criteria sheets posted at the meeting page of the city's website. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards that criterion or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code, which the person testifying believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the additional evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional testimony, arguments, or evidence regarding the application. The DRB shall grant such requests by continuing the public hearing or leaving the record open for additional written testimony, arguments, or evidence. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Is there a presentation by the applicant? Mr. Williams?
No, I just, in my application, I had submitted a combination of horizontal and a shake center accent, kind of like what we've done on the north end of the dining hall.
Mr. Williams, can you state your name and your address, please, and what your role is in the hearing?
Sure, I'm sorry. I'm Guy Williams. I live at 6052 Old Moscow Road in Pullman, Washington. I'm a volunteer for the Cannon Beach Conference Center. I oversaw the construction of their last 3 major projects down there. I'm a volunteer.
Okay, good. Thank you. So go ahead and tell us what your proposal is.
Okay. Well, the River House is a building that was moved when they built the Pacific View Lodge over on the beach. So they moved the beach house inland. And it's a shake siding. It is in definite need of replacement. And what I would like to propose is either a combination of the imitation shake and horizontal siding like we did on the north end of the new dining hall. That would give some contrast and some character to the building and yet afford the conference center a lot better maintenance finish to take care of.
Okay. Anything else?
Not, I mean, I'm available for any questions.
Okay. Are there presentations by opponents? Is there staff response?
Staff recommends approval.
Okay, so I'll close the public hearing and open it up for commission board discussion. Y'all,
Yes.
anybody?
I don't understand why it can't be cedar shingles again. I mean, what was the word in there that it's like again, monotonous? Like it's gonna still
Yeah.
be the side shakes, the siding, the long siding. And it's a really cute building right by the river
It is beautiful.
there. And I don't understand why they can't replace it with cedar shingles.
So Mr. Williams, as I understand the application, you're not doing anything to the east side that faces the trail or the west side that faces the parking lot. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, because they're actually, those are all in pretty good shape. It's just the
The
north and south.
Correct.
And looks like the north is really, interestingly, is the most beat up of all the shingles. Have you priced I know you probably have, but have you priced the bundle at a square of shingles lately?
No, I haven't. I talked to a contractor that we would have do the work and he was just, he just mentioned that it would be extremely exorbitant to do the natural cedar shake again.
Well, I guess it's just not that I'm advocating at this point, but I do happen to know that a square, 100 square feet of number one cedar shingles is $1,000, which is about 10 times what I paid for it the last time I bought any.
I think you're right.
It's just amazing. And then hardy plank, which you guys seem to like to use, is about $180 a square. I can kind of see the motivation, but it is kind of a prominent building, at least from on the north side, because you're coming in, as you're coming into town, your eyes look over at that, at the peak. And
Yeah, that's why I offered a combination of the siding to put that the imitation cedar shakes like we did on the north end of the dining hall in the center of the building.
What is that material actually?
It's a composite. It's well, Louisiana Pacific is the one that makes it. It's a chipboard basically, but it's in a offset shake pattern.
This picture is representative of what it's gonna look, what it would look like. What's this note that you have here, would prefer all horizontal siding?
Well, just because it would be easier for us to do as a volunteer project if it was all one-sided and it's easier to handle, but we're more than, obviously we're wanting to do what is acceptable to the design review board.
Mhm.
And it would give the building more character than just all horizontal. That's
Anita, you have any thoughts?
Well, yes, I do, actually. Hello. This is my first meeting, a brand new member. I was really drawn to the criteria of the monotony of the conference center in all of their buildings coming into town. I feel that the River House should be unique in the cedar siding that it currently has. It's on a pathway that is prominent and visual to people. So I feel that the conference center could probably just cedar side it and continue its cute charm. Rather than, the horizontal siding and the Louisiana Pacific fake siding.
I agree. Even though I said
I
it.
mean, in keeping with Cannon Beach and the uniqueness and charm, and I might think that the conference center would like to get away from the grayness and horizontal look that is within their whole campus, I guess, as it was referred to.
It does seem like it's it's a historic building for sure. I mean, I imagine it was built in the 20s. Who's been around long enough to remember where it was moved from?
I don't know, Mike.
Robin.
Dooley's West Texas Barbecue, that was one of the
It was in downtown, wasn't it? It was.
could be.
I remember. Do you?
Mhm.
Was it
And
next to?
it was right on the end of First Street, probably just a little bit to the north as it hits the beach. And then it was moved in probably 1996, I'm going to say, maybe 95.
Oh, right. It was, at the end, it was the end of Hemlock.
Is that Hemlock? I thought it was Fir.
Oh, Hemlock is well, that building that you're referring to stretches from Hemlock to Spruce almost.
Yeah,
Not quite. Not
but
quite.
as you come as you cross the bridge and come to the next stop sign and you turn left or right, that's Fir, isn't it?
Yes.
Right.
Okay, yeah. So, but it would have sat where they built the Pacific View Lodge, which is that big building on the right there.
Near Whale Park, yeah.
Yeah, right. It was, right beside Whale Park. So it would have been in that area north of Whale Park, right on the beach.
Right.
Right.
I think the other thing is that they just want to do the north and the south ends, and that just, to do a different siding and leave the east and the west, it just seems like it's doing a real disservice to that building, continuity in siding. If they're not going to do the east and the west, then they should just maybe consider the cedar siding replacement, same material. It just seems like it's gonna look funny if it's horizontal on the north and the south, or fake shingles. And then the east and the west are gonna retain the cedar shake. It's gonna become a kind of a discombobulated building in
Well,
my,
maybe,
in my eye.
I agree.
maybe the upper portion up towards the peak could be shingles. You don't really see, at least on the north side, you don't really see what's going on down below. But yeah, I tend to agree with you, Anita.
I think continuity is important for,
Well, new
Exciting.
cedar shingles are going to look quite different from the existing sides
Yeah, for a
for
while.
several years.
so there's
Yeah.
there's no plan to replace the east or the west side of the building.
No,
Not at this time, and when it becomes necessary, they'll be doing something, yes.
Do you have any idea how long that would be?
I don't foresee it in the next 5 years.
So the shingles could weather and blend in by that time.
Well, that's kind of a look here too, anyhow, like with new shingles and old shingles.
Are the phony shingles available in other colors that might be closer to the color of the existing shingles?
They could be painted any color.
I just think it's a really prominent building too, and it's like a walkway and you walk by it all the time, and I do at least.
I do.
It's turning it into the monotony of the conference center, the gray, gray, gray. And then taking away something that's so charming.
Mhm.
And I mean, I don't know I've seen this. It doesn't look like cedar shingles. It doesn't look like, it would look odd on one side, on the other side.
I
it's
think it
kind
would
of,
look like a mismatch of,
they're kind of up and down.
yeah.
If they would be open to paint it any recommended color, actually. Everything we've done though has basically been through the design review and planning is why the new buildings have been gray primarily.
Gray hardy plank.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't love that phone, I don't want to say phony. I mean, that's, I don't like that, particularly that style with the up and down to make it look sort of, rustic or whatever. I mean, if they're gonna make things that look like shingles, they should just be, they should look like a shingle wall rather than, Jed Clampett sort of.
yeah.
Well, so Anita, you think, you're saying you want to see cedar shingles. Michelle, you're agreeing with Anita?
Yeah.
Dave, what's your point of view?
I guess I'm kind of neutral.
Well, can I ask you, what if we asked him to come back next month with a cost comparison, a real cost comparison that shows the difference in price?
Is that something that we take into consideration? Is that
Well,
just,
it's not in the criteria, no. But
I just want to see consistency. If they're just talking about reciting the north and the south side, it seems to me that, you would want to have cedar siding so that it's consistent in its look and the building doesn't become just a mismatch of different materials.
one way that people do it to save on costs is to do cedar shingles down to, certain level at least. And then do cedar board and bat, below at the ground level.
I could maybe get by that.
That's maybe, that's
Maybe.
a possibility.
Yeah, it would
If
be,
you're trying to save money.
yeah, it would definitely be possible to do the gables in a cedar shake, I guess, a natural cedar shake.
And then I'm curious as to why whatever board from the conference center decided just to do the north and the south ends without doing the entire building and preference the materials obviously that are less expensive, I guess, in their.
Do you have the photos up there, Robert? Do you have the photos that you've got in the packet you can show? I looked at it today and it does look like, strangely, the creek side along the trail is in very good shape with the porch and everything. And the back side that faces the parking lot that nobody can really see is in good shape. It's just those big side walls that are in kind of terrible. And they are definitely kindling material. I can guarantee you there. I'll be there with my boxes to pick it up.
We'd be more than happy to have you have them.
Right. Well, that might be an ethical lapse, though.
Talk about that later.
Right. So anyway, you can't turn that.
No, I can't.
Anyway, so the east and the west, or north and south are the ones that are
Yeah.
in work. Well, I'll entertain a motion if somebody wants to make a motion.
I don't totally know how to do that.
Well,
I motion that they try to do the top and then,
I mean, if you, well,
Black
I
on the
guess,
bottom?
okay, number one, if you want them to stick with cedar shingles, the existing material, then you can say, just say, that they should do that cedar shingles should be the material of choice here, period. If you want to make a, some sort of hybrid thing that they could do, the hardy plank, below with shingles above, and just, state that. But,
I prefer cedar shingles all the way, but I understand the cost, even though that's not really.
yeah,
Can we have them come back and show us what the materials that they're picking?
yeah.
That's what I would motion, then I guess.
You want to continue the meeting? You want to continue the meeting and let them come back with,
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, a second chance, yeah.
right?
Continue the meeting, come back with some,
Well, we kind of did that
Better.
with the Beaver Street.
yeah, and then I missed
building.
it.
Yeah,
So that's my motion to come back with a different, with incorporating cedar shingles and maybe the hardy plank,
as much as
and yeah,
cedar shingles.
real cedar
as
shingles.
possible, yeah.
Yeah, not the fakes.
And where would you make the switch from one to the other?
What you said, up to the gables, up to
Well,
where the roof line ends, and then maybe,
like that.
I don't know, I'm trying to be nice.
The facade is in the roof line.
That was a terrible motion. It was my first.
If I could just, like, the motion should be, you know, that the north and the south side should be the Cedar Shake that it is, I would totally approve that now. If the conference center could say that they'll just reside the north and the south in the Cedar Shake,
It's actually cedar cedar shingles is what is the term.
yeah.
Okay, is that a motion?
I would make a motion that to reside the north and the south in the Cedar Shake that needs to be replaced.
Shingles.
Hey, second,
Okay. We have a,
sorry.
What happened to Michelle?
well, there was.
Well, that was terrible. I
there
did a
was
bad
a
job.
second. That wasn't terrible. It's your first effort. Fine. So, okay, well, there wasn't a second, so Anita made another motion and she seconded it.
Okay,
So we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. You want to call a roll?
I think you guys normally just say all in favor.
We can.
Okay, that's, I can call roll if you want.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, sure.
Anita,
Yes.
Dave,
abstain.
Dave? What's your vote?
I'm abstaining.
Oh, abstaining.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll vote yes.
I vote yes too.
Okay. That's the decision.
And the conference center can appeal that, I'm guessing, if they feel like
yes.
okay.
Let me, I thought there was some text here. Anyway, Mr. Williams, if that, so the decision is to reside both the north and south sides with cedar shingles. And if you don't agree with that decision, you can appeal it to the city council within
I believe 14 days.
14 days. And that's that.
Okay, well, I thank you for your time and I'll put together some financial elements to it. And if they deem that they want to appeal it, I'll let them do that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thanks.
All right.
Hey, Jen, where should I go?
So, yeah, can I have a motion to approve the signing of the order?
So
Joan, it'll be your second motion.
I motion to approve signing the order.
Yeah,
I second.
all right, then moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Oh,
Aye. And good to the order. All right. And we're not adjourning. We're blending in with the other good folks on other committees and boards. And I have another obligation. I will hand the gavel over to whom?
yep.
Oh,
with the way the camera is, if you just want to stand or near the table where I can turn the podium around.
Yeah, why don't we turn the podium around?
Actually, I can. I switch over to that.
And I'm like very.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I will get you.
what is this?
So we have a PowerPoint. Can I get you to launch that real quick?
Here. See you later.
Hey, Mike,
All right, why Jed's gonna get that up, I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. Our administration. We're gonna discuss it. As we're getting going, I just want to get started because it is what I like to call Little Friday, Thursday night. So I appreciate you all being here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ashley Driscoll. I am an attorney with a firm called Barry Elsner and Hammond in Portland. I've been there approximately 8 years now. We represent a variety of local governments all across Oregon. And so I think right now we finally have our 8th attorney. We had a little bit of a little staffing issue there for a moment, but we have 8 attorneys. We are full-time representation for 25 entities and have about 30 to 50 special project for other entities going on at any time. So we do a lot of work with local government. I was just joking with Jeff, this is my second time doing this type of presentation in a month. So we see a lot of these issues. Before we get started, I end up spending a lot of time in Cannon Beach. I feel like people know my face and know who I am. I hear names a lot, but I don't know faces. So if you wouldn't mind, if we could just introduce ourselves and talk or know which board or committee you're on, that would be really helpful. We'll start right here.
Robin Rosalie, City Council.
Jeanette Pierce Mushin, Public Works.
Barb Dopp, Parks and Planning.
Stacy Benefield, Farmers Market and Parks.
Sinclair Parks Committee and Planning.
Okay,
I'm Jan Siebert Woman and I'm just a volunteer.
perfect. And then Jen, could you help me with the people on Zoom, those who are present?
Okay, on Zoom, we have Clay Newton from the Planning Commission.
Hi, Clay.
Hi, good evening. I'm driving. I don't know if you can see me or not. I'm Clay Newton. I'm on the Planning Commission.
Mike Bates is from the Planning Commission. There's some audio issues, so won't be able to speak.
Okay.
Anita Dewar from the Design Review Board.
Mhm.
And Parks, yep. Councilor Brandon Ogilvy.
Know him? Yep.
Aaron Matusik from the Planning Commission.
Hi, Ashley.
Hey.
And Mickey Moritz from the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Hi there. Thanks for coming, Ashley.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Okay, so let's get started. So as I mentioned, I've done quite a few of these presentations, and I think the place to start is thank you. Being on board a commission member, being a city council member, it takes up a substantial amount of your time. And I know the city really appreciates all the time you give the city, and especially spending what I hope is less than 90 minutes with me going through an ethics training on Little Friday is a big sacrifice of your time. So I'm going to be going through a lot of the laws that govern public officials who are typically volunteers. And I think sometimes at the end of this presentation, people feel like some of these laws are a little onerous. There are, some penalties for violating the laws. I think it's important to remember that these laws really only apply to 99.9% of folks. If you're here at this training, they likely, you're likely not going to run afoul of them. So they apply to you, but you're likely not going to run afoul of them, especially if you're interested in learning about them and ways to avoid them. So I will try to respect your time and try to go through this in about 90 minutes. Sometimes I can get through it quicker. I like to balance telling some stories and providing some color to the different legal issues with respecting your time. So I will provide examples. None of them will be from Cannon Beach or anywhere near Cannon Beach. I am pretty careful about which examples I'm going to use, with the exception of the shingles. I will definitely talk about the shingles. Okay. So the goals for tonight, you don't need to be an expert. So as volunteers, this is to give you an idea of some of the laws that govern public officials and issues to be aware of. My expectation is not by the end of this presentation that you're going to know the ins and outs of all of the public ethics meetings and public records laws. My goal for tonight is that by the end of the presentation, you know what issues to look for and you know who to ask for questions. So I like to know an agenda before I go into any presentation. So this is our agenda for tonight. So first we're going to discuss authority, and that is mostly how local government works. where do you fit in as your role as a member of a board of commission? I'm going to talk about the Oregon government ethics laws. That's abuse of office, how you deal with conflicts of interest. I'm going to talk about public meetings, and then I'm going to talk about public records. There are some issues that I think are more important to cover, and I'm going to give them more time. Other issues such as public records, I'm just going to kind of cruise through that and let you know what the highlights are, let you know what issues to be aware of. But as board and commissioners, you're not responding to public records requests, so you don't need to know the ins and outs of which records are exempt and which are not. And then at the end, we're going to have a little time for Q&A. And at the end of these topics, each one of these topics, I'm going to pause for questions. So I'm going to try to get through the general topic. And then if you have a question, we can ask that, go through that before we move on to the next topic. Okay, so the first topic I want to talk about is authority. So Cannon Beach is structured with the city council, and the city council has all of the authority that it has not otherwise delegated. So the city council has all the decision-making power for the city, unless it has delegated that to an individual such as the city manager through the charter, or has delegated that authority to one of your boards and commissions. I saw an email from Bruce this week that to the city council and potential city council members mentioning that the city council meets between 8 and 10 times a month. That is a very significant meeting schedule for a local government with a volunteer city council. And I think it goes to show how much work the city council does. The city council, members of the city council are asked to carry a really heavy load in almost any city, but especially one like Cannon Beach that has so many big projects going on. City council members are also required to be up to speed on a variety of issues facing the city and to be knowledgeable enough about those issues to make really important decisions that affect everybody within the city. So because that is such a heavy load, they delegate some of that authority and some of the work that goes into making the best decision for the city to advisory boards and commissions. So the city of Cannon Beach has 9 advisory board committees and decision-making commissions. Most of the boards and commissions are advisory only. So because the city council has to know about so many different areas, they have delegated authority to the Public Works Commission or the Parks and Rec Commission to really delve into some issues specific to that area and then make recommendations to the city council about how they think the city should best approach that issue. The city council can then hear the recommendation, hear the issues on both sides, and then make its own independent decision, taking their advisory board's recommendation into mind. There are some occasions where a board and commission, specifically the planning commission, has been delegated authority to make a decision on its own. So a planning commission decision will stand unless appealed to the city council. Most other board and commissions are just making a recommendation to the city council. So each of the board of commissions is unique in terms of its size, its meeting schedule, its specific function. However, the overall mission is the same. Again, from my perspective, it's to relieve some of the load of the city council, but also involve more citizens in the working of the city. The more engaged community members, the better local government typically runs. So these local board of commission seats in positions provide an opportunity for more people within the city to get involved and give recommendations to the council. So I touched on this a little bit. Council appointed boards and commissions are responsible to an advisory to the city council unless the council has delegated specific responsibility for independent action. So if you're interested in what authority has been delegated to your specific board and commission, that's all online. You go to the city code, you go to administration, you find your board and commission, and you can see exactly what kind of authority the city council has delegated to that specific board and commission. And that is your authority. You're only authorized to act on behalf of the city within that authority that has been delegated, either through the municipal code or, through other action by the city council. The city council can always say, yes, we have a arts board and commission. We haven't asked them before to weigh in on, whether or not a theater group should come to town. However, we've been asked this question. We would like the arts board to weigh in on that. It's not an official delegated authority through the municipal code, but the city council can always make the decision to ask that group to weigh in on a specific issue. So again, generally, these groups just make recommendations to the city council. On rare occasions, they are actually making final decisions on behalf of the city. So I think this is an interesting issue. So authority as a board and commission member or authority of a city council member. So generally speaking, neither the charter or the municipal code grant power to an individual member of a board or a commission to act on behalf of their body or their city. One of the exceptions to that is the mayor. The mayor has been delegated some authority to act as an individual, for instance, preside over the meetings, sign documents on behalf of the city, be the political head of the city. But generally speaking, as an individual member of a board or commission or the city council, you do not have any additional authority over and above what a member of the public has. So this comes up sometimes in public records. You know, a member of a board or commission or a member of a city council will ask for, public records. Well, are you asking on behalf of the board? Are you authorized to ask on behalf of the board? Or are you asking as a member of your board and commission? And if the answer is, I'm just asking on behalf of myself, then, you have to do a public records request. If you're acting on behalf of your board or commission, has that board or commission authorized you to make that public records request? Members of board and commission are expected to abide by the decision of their body, whether or not they are a member who voted on the prevailing side. So when this one comes up, it takes me back to what I refer to as the marijuana days, when marijuana was legalized in Oregon. And I spent a good year of my time going to public meetings specifically about marijuana. In one of the meetings that I went to, a member of the Economic Development Commission was required to come speak to the city council regarding the recommendations of the Economic Development Commission. And the Economic Development Commission believes strongly in authorizing marijuana to come to this specific town. The chair of that board disagreed with that decision. So when he was doing the presentation on behalf of the Economic Development Commission, he was bound to give their recommendation. However, when it came to public comment, he could come up during public comment and say, here's my personal opinion about this. When he was acting on behalf of his body, he had to give the opinion of the body, but he had time to give his personal opinion as well. I'm just going to take a drink really quick. I think it's important to understand when you're making a distinction between when you're speaking up, when you're authorized to speak, and when you're speaking as when you're giving a personal opinion. So that one's a pretty easy topic. I'm sorry. So attendance at any board or commission meeting is sent by that individual board. And the staff liaison position, I'm sorry. Wait a second. Sorry. Yeah.
This is being recorded, right?
Yes.
Okay. I can't stay for too long.
Okay.
It's like, oh.
Have you ever had one of those moments where like your just heart starts beating and you don't really know why? That just happened to me.
We're a
So,
friendly group.
yeah. So staff liaison position, it is pretty straightforward. The staff liaison is somebody who's assigned to your board and commission. They come to your board and commission meeting. Their role is just to provide staff support to that meeting. And also to bring back the desires of the board and commission to staff and council to start being able to implement those. They're non-voting members. So the same is true for your council liaison role. They're non-voting member of the board and commission. They're again to help the board and commission follow the delegated authority from city council. They're non-voting. And their role, again, how I see the staff liaison, the council liaison position is that both are designed to bring the expertise necessary to this volunteer group. And then to also ensure that the volunteer group is following the direction that's been delegated by the city council and bring the city council back what they need. So that's the end of
the structure and the delegation of authority. Are there any questions about that before I move on to government ethics? Okay. So I think this is the real meat and potatoes of what we're going to be talking about. There are 6 or 7 different sections of the Oregon government ethics laws. The ones that I'm touching on tonight are the ones that I think are most important for you to know. Those are abuse of office, conflicts of interest, and then penalties. If you have questions about reporting requirements, I can answer those. Nepotism, that doesn't come up too much, but can definitely answer questions. And then the Oregon Ethics Commission, I can talk about that as well. So do the Oregon government ethics laws apply to me? You know, I'm just a member of the library board. The answer is yes, they do. So anybody who has been delegated authority to act as part of a board doing the city business will be a public official under the Oregon government ethics laws. So the first one I want to talk about is it's ORS 244-040, and this is abuse of office. So this is the one that comes up, I would say, the most often, and it sounds very straightforward, but they are somewhat I would refer to as sneaky elements to it. So public officials may not use or attempt to use their position to obtain financial gain or avoid a financial detriment that would not otherwise be available to them, but for the holding of the official public position. The basic requirement here, the basic concept is that you should not be getting a financial benefit because of your role with the city. I think that's pretty obvious to anybody who is a volunteer with the city. And it's pretty obvious to anybody who lives within the city that you would want your public officials not to gain any benefit that they wouldn't have, but for their involvement with the city. However, the Oregon law is a little bit more expansive than that. So the abuse of office applies not only to you, but also to your relatives. And the relatives is a decently long list. So your spouse, your parent, your step-parent, your child, the parent, stepchild, sibling, spouse, son-in-law of your spouse, any individual for whom the public official has a legal obligation to support, any individual from whom the candidate receives benefits arising from the individual's employment, and any member of your household. So when you're thinking about abuse of office, and we'll talk about it with conflicts too, it's not just you. So for instance, is your child receiving a benefit, and they're receiving a benefit that they would not receive but for your involvement with the city? Is your spouse receiving that? So again, you have to look at both you and this long list of people who are also related to you. Are they getting a benefit or avoiding a financial detriment that they wouldn't get but for your work with the city? And then secondly, it also applies for a business for which you're associated. So if you are an employee at a bakery in town, and that bakery is getting a benefit that they wouldn't get but for your employment or but for your involvement with the city, this law is going to be triggered. So a business for which you're associated is if a person is a director, officer, owner, employee, or agent of the business, or the person owns or has owned more than $1,000 of stock, equity, or stock options or debt interest. A publicly held corporation if the person is an officer or director of a publicly traded company or has owned more than $100,000 worth of stock. Essentially, any type of source of income is going to be considered a business for which you are associated. So examples. The one that I wrote in was Mike Morgan talked about the shingles. So let's talk about that one. So as a member of the design review board, if he is offered the shingles, if sure, Mike, come down and you can take the shingles off my building. If he does that and that's not open to all other members of the public on an equal basis, that will be considered an abuse of office because that is a benefit that he is getting that is worth more than $50 that he wouldn't have gotten but for his role here at the city. However, if that applicant makes that available, is like, hey, anybody who wants it can come down to my property and take all the shingles they want, Mike Morgan is free to do that. Another one that has come up more than I would like to mention is the second one, which is members of the Parks and Community Services Board receive free VIP passes to the local softball
softball tournament. So this one comes up in various different ways. It actually came up just a couple weeks ago with one of my clients. A city manager called and said, you know, this concert venue is looking for places to go in Oregon. They're really interested in this city. What do you think about allowing the city council to go to one of these concerts and see what it's about? So when it comes before the city council, they have an idea of what they're voting on. My first question is like, yeah, I mean, that sounds great. You know, like it will help them make their decision, but how much are those concert tickets worth? And what it came back is those concert tickets were worth like $175. So that's like a screech to the halt. Like, no, you know, you can't give members of the city council tickets that are valued at $175 just because you want them to see what this concert venue is like. Because really what it looks like to anybody from the outside is that they're being bought. Is that these folks are going to be applicants in front of the city council at some point, and you know they have sort of greased their wheels with some free concert tickets. So that one comes up a lot. A public works member using his role as a public works to lobby the city to award a maintenance contract to his sister. So again, it's not him, it's his sister, or even to take it out, a business that his sister works for. She could be the receptionist, you know, in a big corporate office, and the public works committee member can believe that, you know, this is in the interest of the city, but it's still going to be an abuse of office because if the city makes the decision to hire that company, it's going to financially benefit a business for which one of his relatives are associated with. So that's where this kind of gets more complicated than as a city councilor, as a commission member, I can't benefit financially from my role. That's easy. As you get to the more, if you get kind of to the outside, these are more difficult questions that won't necessarily like raise a red flag initially that I need to ask about this, or I need to make sure that it's okay for me to be involved in this transaction. So another one, this one also comes up quite a bit. A public works employee borrows the city's public water power washer to prepare his house for painting. So he's taking the power washer home. Rental value of that power washer is, you know, $50 an hour. He has it for 3 hours. That's a financial benefit he wouldn't get but for his role with the city. Another one, just to keep going on some of these examples, is a famous case in the state of Oregon. An officer with the state of Oregon was buying a fleet of Ford Tauruses. And in buying, you know, 20 Ford Tauruses at once, he got a substantial discount. You know, they're being sold, they retail at $15,000. The state was getting them for 10. He thought, great deal. I'm going to get myself a Ford Taurus. In doing that, he got a financial benefit that members of the public didn't get, that he wouldn't have gotten but for his role with the state. And so he was found in violation of the Oregon public ethics laws. One thing to be aware of is gifts. So there are some exceptions. So any part of an official compensation package, that's not going to be abuse of office. That makes sense. You know, this covers public employees too. Like, of course, they're being paid for their work. That monetary benefit they're getting, but for their public employment, is their compensation package. So this is all about transparency. As long as that is an officially adopted compensation package, you can also have official compensation packages for boards and commissions that include, you know, iPads for use as their board and commission members, or some sort of insurance. All of that can be given to board and commission members as part of their official compensation package. You can also do honorariums at a max value of 50. And then clearly like reimbursement for expenses, unsolicited awards for professional achievement. I love that one. Who's out there soliciting awards for their professional achievement and then getting money from it. Gifts from a source that could not reasonably have a legislative or administrative interest in your role. And we're going to get to that. But essentially, yes, you can get gifts from your husband or spouse that also lives in the city, or, you know, from a friend who can order you flowers, and that would not trigger any of these laws. Gifts with an aggregate value of $50 in a calendar year from a source with a legislative or administrative interest. So I like to use myself as an example for this one. So, you know, I'm a contractor with the city. So I have an administrative interest in the city. So if I came every day and I brought if I came one day and I brought a cup of coffee for Bruce, or I brought a cup of coffee for the counselor, that's fine. That cup of coffee right now is less than $50. Maybe that will not be true in another year from now, but that would be fine. That is not me, greasing the wheels or trying to garner favor with gifts to a public official. But if I started doing that every single week for an entire year, that's going to get over the $50 limit. And that's going to start being an abuse of office for whatever public official I'm buying gifts for. So it is totally fine if somebody with a legislative or administrative interest buys you a cup of coffee, takes you out for lunch once, gets you a small gift for Christmas. However, as a public official, you need to track that. Is it one gift? Is it 5 gifts? What is the value of those gifts? And a lot of times they're unsolicited. Do you have to send that gift back? Yeah, sometimes you do. And, it is on you. It's not me that's going to get in trouble if I buy Robin a cup of coffee every single day for an entire year. It's Robin. So you need to be aware of that as a public official and feel free to say no. So a gift is anything of economic value, but excludes things such as a gift from relatives or member of your household of the public official, gifts in the form of plaques, trophies, mementos with a resale value of $25, and a gift as part of a private business, employment, or volunteerism. And then there's several other exemptions from gifts that I didn't put down in here. But when you're looking at gifts, what you need to ask yourself is, what is the source of this gift? Could the source of this gift reasonably have a legislative interest in my role with the city or an administrative interest in the role with the city? And then second, what's the value of this gift? Is it over $50? Have they given me any other gifts this year? So you need to take that into account when you're accepting the gift and realize that the onus is on you. And I say it one more time, sometimes you just have to say no, that, thank you for this gift, but I can't accept it. So I'm going to move on to conflicts of interest. Conflicts of interest and abuse of office can actually cover some of the same ground, but a conflict of interest arises when a decision or recommendation you're making would or could result in a financial benefit or detriment to you, your relatives, or any business for which you are associated. So conflicts come in 2 forms, actual or potential. So again, conflicts of interest, and one thing that comes up a lot in the smaller communities, conflicts of interest does not mean something that makes you uncomfortable. It is not, we're talking about my neighbor's property. It makes me uncomfortable. It's going to put me in an awkward decision. So I'm not going to make a land use decision about that person's property. I have a conflict because he's my really good friend. That's not a legal conflict. The only time a legal conflict comes into play is if you, a relative or business for which you're associated with, stands to avoid a financial loss or have a financial gain from a decision that you're going to make in your role as a public official. So again, same with abuse of office. This is all about dollars. So if there's money involved, then it could potentially be a conflict of interest. And the difference between an actual and a potential conflict of interest is this. An actual conflict of interest arises when any decision or act by you would definitely result in a financial benefit or avoiding a financial detriment to you, your relatives, or a business for which you're associated with. So definitely, if you award the contract to your sister's janitorial service, that janitorial service will benefit financially. That is a very clear actual conflict of interest. But let's say instead the decision is to approve an RFP, a request for proposals for janitorial services, for which your sister's firm is going to apply. That is not a guaranteed financial benefit to a business for which one of your relatives is associated with. So for participation in that decision would be a potential conflict of interest because it could result in a financial benefit to your sister's business. So this can get a little bit cloudy. When is it a definite decision? When can it actually be when it will actually result in a financial benefit? When is there, some questions about whether it will take effect, especially with a board of commission? We're making a recommendation to the city council, and then the city council is going to make a final decision. So when you're involved with the decision, there's one step between, your recommendation and a final decision being made. I still like to err on the side of caution if it's an actual conflict. If you are recommending the city council award a contract to your sister's business, my preference would be for you to treat that as a actual conflict of interest and not participate. However, there are other people and other attorneys out there that says that that is a potential conflict because you don't know how the city council is going to vote. The city council could say, thanks for your recommendation, we're making our own decision. But then you get into an area where it's like, well, how often do they rubber stamp your decisions? Like, do you believe strongly that in making this recommendation, the city council is going to rubber stamp it and your sister's business is going to get that, your sister's firm is going to get that business? I personally wouldn't want to put myself in that situation. So if I'm at the board and commission level, if I'm faced with what I would consider an actual conflict, I would treat it as such. So how do you treat a conflict of interest? And I want to be really specific that this is for elected officials. So for an elected or appointed official, when you have a conflict, when it's an actual conflict, you have to announce the conflict each and every time that matters on the agenda or comes up at your meeting. Once you announce the actual conflict of interest, you have to refrain from participation in any official action, including any discussion on the matter. This one I once went a couple rounds with the city councilor about. He had a spouse who was a public employee and in the union, and he wanted to participate in the discussions about the union contract, but then would not make the final vote because he knew that was an actual conflict. The issue with that is that if you have an actual conflict, you can't participate at all. You not only can you not participate in the vote, you also can't participate in any discussions. So again, I'm pretty cautious. My recommendation to the councils that I work with is that if you have an actual conflict of interest and your body is discussing that matter, I step down from the dais. I, turn off my screen when I'm on Zoom. I make some sort of physical barrier between myself and the issue. So I show that I'm not participating at all. For a potential conflict, all you have to do is announce the potential conflict every time the issue arises. So once you announce it, if it comes up at another meeting, you have to announce it again. And then after you make your disclosure, and your disclosure does not have to be specific, like I stand to gain $5,000 from this decision. You don't need to give any personal information like that. All you have to say is that I have a potential conflict and describe the nature of the conflict because the business that we're talking about, employs my sister. And then you can go ahead and participate in the discussions and any of the votes. My strong recommendation is that if you think you could potentially have a potential conflict of interest, even if there's like 4 potentials in the discussion, if we issue the RFP, then if my sister's firm decides to vote on it, then I could have a conflict. It's worth it to announce it. It's not a lot of process. All you have to say is I have this conflict, and then you go on participating. So there's very little downside to announcing a conflict. So I recommend that you do. So there are exceptions to conflict of interest. One of them is the definition of business does not include nonprofits where the associated public official receives no remuneration, they receive no financial benefit. And the second one is the class exception. So, class exception is really difficult because that's a decision that's made at the Oregon Government Ethics Commission level, considering the facts on the ground. So this comes up a lot in Planning Commission. Let's say that you own a piece of property in the commercial downtown or a residential piece of property, and you're making a recommendation or decision about rezoning that property from residential to commercial. And in doing so, that will impact the value of your property. So that could either be an actual or potential conflict of interest, depending on how you want to look at it. But it affects you and it affects half of the city. So in that situation, you are likely part of a class, and because the class is big enough, you can participate in the discussion and the vote. The issue is, and I noted it before, is that it's hard to know if the group of people that you are part of actually constitutes a class. Where it is clear, and I think this is a really good example, is when members of the city council are making decisions, for instance, about utility bills. You know, what are the utility rates for the city going to be? Any vote that they make on that clearly is going to impact them financially as a resident of the city who owns property. But because that decision literally impacts everybody in the entire city, you qualify for the class exception and you do not have to declare any sort of conflicts before you vote on that. Okay. I'm going to really quickly touch on confidential information. All this text really says that you cannot gain financially from confidential information that you gain through your role as a public official. So you should not use confidential information that you gain otherwise, but specifically if you're gaining from that confidential information financially, that is a very specific violation of these rules. All right, so let's say that there is a violation of the Oregon government ethics rules. You know, what are you looking at? So first, you could have a civil penalty issued against you by the Oregon Government Ethics Committee up to $5,000. You could be removed from office. If you have been found to have benefited from a violation, you may be required to forfeit twice the amount of the profit. And then in rare cases, there can be criminal sanctions. I've been doing this 10 years and I have yet to see even any mention of criminal sanctions. I think it has to be exceptionally egregious for that to be triggered. So what are the takeaways? I think I hit them pretty hard, but what should you be on the lookout for as a member of a board of commissioner or city council? You know, is the action that I'm going to take going to impact me financially? Is it going to impact a relative or a business financially? If that is the case, then you need to take a step back and ask yourself, is this an abuse of office question, or do I have a? So one of the other things before I move away from this topic that is a little bit of a difficult situation is, so you have these questions. Who do you go to? Who do you ask about this? These are all issues that are private and specific to the member of the board of commissioner and the member of the council. So officially, this is personal liability. This is not city liability. My role as a city attorney is to be the attorney for the entity, be the attorney for the city. So because of that distinction, if you bring me an issue, I can't actually provide you legal advice on it because that in itself is abuse of office, because you're getting free legal advice that you wouldn't get but for your role as a public official. So do I still get these questions all the time? Yes. What I typically do is I explain what the law says without giving any legal advice. And then I advise the public official to contact the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. The Oregon Government Ethics Commission has a great website with a phone number on it that if you call, you get a person, and that person helps you out and will answer your questions. So that is the best place to go. And if you forget that, you end up calling me or you end up calling somebody at the city that calls me, I will remind you, I'll tell you what the law is and remind you who to call. So before I move on, any questions about abuse of office for conflicts of interest? Robin, I can see one brewing.
Well, there was a part that I had a question about that.
Well, looks like
I can't remember what it was now.
Looks like we have Clay. So Clay?
What is the, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. So let's say you don't declare a conflict of interest, but either through the conversation or, second guessing yourself, you decide to abstain. How is abstaining, when should we, I guess I'm trying to think about how to use abstaining and when we shouldn't use it, or what it doesn't gain for us. Put another way, say I don't declare a conflict. I am in the conversation about the issue, and then I abstain. I can see why that would be a problem. I
Mhm.
guess I'm just trying to understand the tool in abstaining a little better. And maybe you're going to talk about that later, but it is something that we heard tonight, we've used before, I've used, where I thought there might be some issue there. But it seems like there could be a hybrid on that where you're in the conversation and you still elect to abstain.
Okay, I think I understand your question. So if it's an actual conflict of interest, if somebody, you or somebody you're associated with is going to gain financially from the decision that you're going to make, you have that conflict from the beginning. Does it happen that people don't realize they have a conflict of interest until, you have been discussing something for a meeting or two, and then you start remembering this conversation, you start remembering that, hey, that's actually my brother's business that we're talking about, so I personally have a conflict. Like, how do you put the toothpaste back in the tube? Is that your question?
It is along that line. That's one piece of it. Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to understand abstaining a little better. But if there's a specific question there, it's what happens if you walk into the conversation and through the conversation you realize you do have a conflict.
Right.
Do you abstain out there?
Yeah, so I would tell you at that point, not giving you legal advice, but, point you in the direction of declaring it. And, the next opportunity, I would say that you say, after further discussion on this, I realize I have a conflict of interest. I'm going to excuse myself from the conversation. So you may have already participated in some conversations before that. And that is perhaps a technical violation. If it's an actual conflict, you had that from the beginning, it's a technical violation. However, when you realized it, you did the right thing and rectified it to the extent that you could. And by that point, you're just talking about it. You haven't made any sort of vote on the matter. So, although a technical violation, you corrected it the best that you could. And the same is true with the potential, is that I think this comes up more often than an actual, is that you do realize that there could be a potential for you to benefit financially in the future. And in that case, it's totally fine for you to participate in the conversations. You just need to start announcing from then going forward.
Right.
Does that get to your question?
It helps.
Okay. Any other questions? Nope. Okay, I'll keep moving. So this one I'm going to go through. I think the ethics, the conflicts of interest, and the abuse of office are the thing that I wanted to hit on the hardest tonight, because I do think they are the ways that well-meaning public officials, could get tripped up for exactly as Clay mentioned without even realizing it. So I'm going to pick up the pace as I go through these. So public meetings, what are public meetings? What bodies are subject to the law? So elected and appointed officials must meet in public to deliberate and decide on matters of public policy. Oregon, if you haven't picked up on it so far, has very strong transparency laws. All of these laws are about transparency, that, if you have an interest in a decision that has been brought before the public, and also for the public to have access, but not necessarily participation in all deliberations of public bodies. So the public meetings laws are designed to elicit public access, not necessarily participation. So every body that we're talking about here tonight is a public body that is covered by the Oregon Public Meetings laws. One thing that I do think trips up groups is that officially sanctioned public bodies are obviously governing bodies of the public body. However, if your public body, if your commission, if your design review commission, if your planning commission forms a subgroup, and that subgroup is authorized to make a recommendation to the advisory committee, that subgroup is also a public body subject to the public meetings laws. So I think that is one area that I have noticed with my clients, they maybe don't realize that. So, if you are on the design review board and you are asking for a subcommittee to research shingles and bring you back a recommendation on what sort of shingles code the city should have, but you just think it's easier if 2 or 3 people meet on their own to come to make the recommendation to the subcommittee, to recommendation to city council. It's not as easy as that. When those 3 people meet, they need to meet in a public meeting. So when I say require, what is a public meeting? So again, transparency. There has to be notice of the time and place, and that notice must be reasonably calculated to inform interested persons. So usually 24 hours in advance. And again, there's not a lot of hard and fast laws. It is reasonable person. You know, you do not have to make sure that you go through Cannon Beach and let every single person you know that your body is meeting. It has to be reasonably calculated, not to hide the ball from the public. Personal notice must be given to those who have requested it. So, you know, you have a particular issue, somebody has requested notice. Every time that becomes before the city council, then you do have to provide that notice. Principal subjects have to be discussed. You have to be specific enough to permit a person to decide if he or she feels it's necessary to attend. That does not prohibit adding or adjusting the agenda the night of. I know Cannon Beach doesn't have any problem with that. We do a lot of adjusting the agenda the night of. Other public bodies do not understand that that is fine. So you're doing your best. If you know that you're going to discuss something in advance, you should put it on the agenda so the public knows. However, you know, work needs to get done. Things come up during the day of a city council meeting. It is totally fine to adjust the agenda the night of. Location considerations, again, just to keep moving, it generally must be within the city unless one of these exceptions apply. New in 2020, meetings may be conducted by telephone or electronically if the public has access. So now we have to have all public meetings have a way for the public to access the public meeting telephonically or electronically. And if testimony is taken testimony is taken in person, individuals also have to have a means to be able to take that testimony electronically. So that's new from COVID. It has to be significantly sized room to expected interest in the meeting. Again, back in my marijuana days, there were, you know, sometimes we'd have a public meeting in a room that was seriously insufficient for the interest in the subject matter. And so a public body would have to have auxiliary space available. It's made easier now with Zoom because people can just Zoom in. Votes must be tallied and attributed to each member of the governing body. May use paper ballots, but cannot vote in secret. So this comes up a lot, or used to come up a lot of times in voting or appointing members to certain boards and commissions. The city council would vote, you know, they'd write down who they want on a card, it would come back and you find out who the appointed person was. That is insufficient because it is, you should be able to tell what member of the body voted for which person, or on every single matter, you should be able to pull a complete voting record. So minutes don't need to be verbatim, but they do need to be kept. They must include roll call, any motions, resolutions, or actions, the result of votes, and the substance of all discussions. I mentioned this before, but attendance versus participation. Just because public are allowed access to all public meetings definitely does not mean that the public always gets to participate. Cannon Beach, I think, does a great job of striking the balance of allowing public participation without making meetings overly burdensome. Some of my public bodies allow public comment on every single agenda item, and we routinely have 4-hour meetings. So I think Cannon Beach does a nice job of striking that balance. There are some types of meetings that must allow public participation, specifically land use, and then right of way, and any sort of increase of fees or charges. So along with conflicts of interest and abuse of office, this is the other topic that I want to spend some time on. So a properly noticed public meeting, I think, is pretty easy. If you have an agenda item, you're meeting with your body to do the city's business, super easy. You know the boxes that you need to check. However, Oregon has 2 separate laws. We have a law about meetings of the governing body that shall be open to the public and all persons shall be permitted to attend. That's what we just talked about. The second provision of Oregon law is the prohibition on private meetings. And this got a lot of attention back in 2012 because some commissioners in Lane County got in trouble repeatedly for violation of this provision. And as a result, we got some great case law out of it. Not great case law, clarifying case law. I'll just put it that way. So this says a quorum of the governing body may not meet in private for the purposes of deciding on or deliberating towards a decision on any matter except for executive sessions. So if a quorum, so typically a majority of your body, meets in private and talks about matters that they could later vote on, that is an illegal public meeting. So I think that is relatively easy to discern when you're talking about an in-person meeting. However, the case law through the Handy cases and a case out of TriMet clarified a few things. So first, let's talk about the definition of a meeting. Means the convening of a governing body for which a quorum is required to attend in order to make a decision or deliberate on any matter. Meetings do not include on-site inspection, and they do not include the attendance of a member of a governing body in any national, region, or association. So there are some exclusions for a meeting. So your guys' site visits, those aren't meetings, even if a quorum of people are there. And we talked about quorum, that's the minimum number of people that must participate in order for a body to transact business. Typically, majority of the body is equal to the quorum. Your municipal code defines what a quorum is. The only time this comes up is if there's vacancies. So let's say that you have a board of 5 and you have 2 vacancies. So what's your quorum? The quorum is if you have 2 vacancies, your quorum is 2. Because that is the majority of the seats that are filled. So a gathering of less than a quorum is not a meeting. So this also comes up a lot too. If you have 5 members of committee, all 5 seats are filled, can 2 people meet and talk about the business of that board? Yes, that is not a public meeting because less than a quorum are available or at that meeting, unless you've been delegated authority by your commission to bring back a recommendation on something. In that case, those 2 people are a subcommittee. So that's sort of a nuance to look out for. So subcommittees of a body constitute governing bodies in of themselves, and as such, the quorum would be a majority of the subcommittee. And we already talked about this. A quorum of governing body may not meet in private to deliberate on something that they would decide on.
Ashley,
Yep.
what if they met and then one of the 2 people called a third person?
Oh, we're getting there. Those are the Lane County decisions. So first of all, I talked about the easiest way to distinguish a prohibited public meeting is when everybody is meeting in person. So does that mean that members of the community can no longer gather socially? Cannon Beach is a small town. I'm sure that you have a lot of Christmas parties. You end up at the same soccer games. You end up at the same grocery store. You're also like-minded individuals who probably have a lot of common and hopefully like each other. Can you never meet socially? The answer to that is no. However, if a quorum is present at any of these social gatherings, be very careful not to discuss whatever the topic of your committee is. With city council, just stay away from any topic that has to do with the city. I think city councilors have the most onerous, are in the most onerous position there because almost anything can come to the city council level. But if you are the Parks Committee and there is a land use matter, that's not something that you're going to be asked to vote on. So a quorum of a Parks Committee can talk about something that doesn't have to do with their commission at all. But be cognizant, at some point, such discussions may turn into social gatherings and that could turn into a meeting. One of my other councils just loves after the council meeting to go across the street to the local bar and have a couple drinks after the council meeting, which I get, sometimes you just want to cool down, but it certainly looks like an illegal public meeting when you have all your public officials sitting around. What are they talking about? So I would be very cognizant of social gatherings. If you have a quorum of your committee, that you are not discussing something you can later vote on. So here's the issue, and there's a lot of text on here, so I'm just going to break it down. So in these cases out of Handy and out of TriMet, what they decided is that you can violate the public meetings laws without meeting contemporaneously. So a quorum of a public body can meet in private, even if you're not all in the same room at the same time. How does that happen? That can happen over email, that can happen over text message, that can happen over Nextdoor, and that can happen over Facebook. The elements are that you have a quorum of your public body and you are discussing something that you are later going to have to vote on. If those elements are present, then you have violated the Oregon Public Meetings laws. So how this came up in Lane County a couple of years ago was twofold. So first, members of county commissions are actually employees of the county. So they have offices along in a row. And a member of staff went door to door to the commissioners and had a conversation with each one of the commissioners and shared what the other commissioners had to say. So essentially, they used a staff person to have a deliberation. They used him to have a conversation without ever meeting in public. He was a conduit. And that went to the Oregon Supreme Court. And that's when the Oregon Supreme Court says that you can violate the Oregon Public Meetings laws without actually meeting in person if you have a serial communication. And that guy was, the conduit that allowed them to deliberate without it being public. So by the time they got to the commission meeting, they knew what everybody was voting on. They'd had all the discussions and the meeting was essentially a sham. So that's Lane County number one. So those public officials stayed in their job. They were issued some pretty substantial fines. And one of them decided to do a fundraising campaign. And there was a letter that was sent to the commission. And the letter was about some of the legalities of that commissioner raising money. So then they're going to decide if they're going to have an executive session about this letter. And what happened was two members of the commission had an email exchange. And then one member of that commission then made a phone call to a third member of the commission and shared what the other two members said. So all of a sudden you have a serial communication. You have two people on an email chain and you have one person on a phone call. So the takeaway from that is that serial meetings occur when a series of communications of any kind, directly or through intermediaries, to discuss, deliberate, or take action takes place between a quorum of a governing body. This is even true, though at no given time does a quorum of the governing body communicate contemporaneously about the topic in question. So what does this mean for you guys as public officials? Please don't reply all. I mean, that is the easiest thing that you can do. If there's an email communication, a lot of times, the city will send information out. It is information I always put at the bottom. Please don't reply all. You can certainly reply to me. You can certainly reply to Bruce. You can certainly reply to Jen. But the issue is, if you do a reply all, you could potentially start getting into a deliberation scenario. If it's about whether you're available for the meeting on Wednesday, no, not a violation of the Oregon Public Meetings laws, but it's a bad habit to get in because that can very easily become deliberations on something that you're going to vote on. The other one is social media. There is no case law that has decided this, but the way the cases are going, social media can be used. If you are on Nextdoor or Facebook or whatever the latest social media is, if you see that, 3 members of the city council have already chimed in and given an opinion on something that's being discussed, I guess 3 here would be more than a quorum. If 2 have already, weighed in on that, please don't be the third one. Because again, like when the first person commented, they were just commenting. When the second person commented, that was 2, that's less than a quorum. As the third person, it's going to be a public meeting violation for all 3, even though the first 2, had no way to anticipate the third was going to happen. I am hoping there's a legislative fix coming on this because again, if Robin calls a member of the council, has a conversation and that's totally fine on something they're going to vote on. And then that person she calls then calls 2 other members. Robin has been inadvertently dragged into a public meeting, even though she really did nothing wrong. So there are some loopholes. There are some issues to be aware of. So my takeaways from that are just be cognizant of how you use email, how you use text messages, and how you use
social media when you are discussing something that you could later be required to vote on. So again, much more onerous for city council because that's almost everything that has to do with the city. For you, members of Board of Commission, you just need to be aware of your topic. So again, just the closing slide, no non-contemporaneous communications involving a majority of your governing body in the aggregate, discussing or deliberating on a topic that you may later discuss or deliberate on in a public meeting. That could be in violation of the Oregon Public Meetings laws. I'm not really going to touch on executive sessions because boards and commissioners don't typically have them. You can have executive sessions. Executive sessions are typically just the city council for a very limited amount of topics, and they are strictly construed, and no final decision can be made in executive session. So I'm just gonna, so best practices, I think I already hit on these pretty hard. I think we all understand, you know, my perspective and my advice to you on public meetings laws. Any questions before I head into public records? No? Oh, I got a hand from Clay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. So what if I send out an email and let's say it's to three, what are best practices for the people receiving that, my fellow commission members? What is their best practice relative to responding, not responding to that email?
So let me make sure I heard you right. You received an email that was sent out by our quorum of people already involved in this? Is that the scenario you're talking about?
No. So I was suggesting that let's say I send out an email and I have three other commission members in that email copied. So a quorum. What is their best practice to that email they receive? Should they respond, hey, this is a quorum? Should they ignore the email? What is our best practice when we're in that situation?
Right. So if I was a member of that commission who received an email and it was deliberating on a matter, or at least expressing opinions on a matter that I would later vote on, I would tell you from a technical perspective, only one person has expressed an opinion at that point. So as you know, going lawyer, I would say that there's been no deliberation because it's just one person passing along their information. The real violation starts when multiple people start expressing opinions. That being said, I would say that, you know, let's say a public meeting violation has occurred. It happens, you know, these things happen. How do you correct this error? At your next public meeting, you bring that information into the public meeting. Because the real issue is transparency, that these things shouldn't be happening, not within the public view. So how do you correct that? You bring that conversation into the public meeting. And frankly, like, because the law has not frankly been fixed on this yet, I think that these things end up happening quite a bit. You know, like I accidentally got into this conversation, or I didn't realize this email got forwarded to me. What do I do about it? Well, you bring it up at your next meeting. You make sure that all the information that was discussed in that email chain gets discussed in public. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful. It seems like that sort of thing is no big deal at first. Like if someone responds, not a bigger deal, and we would have to make it public. So it's just one of those. I guess we just have to be really careful about the emails, because that seems like where we have the greatest likelihood of that breakdown is in emails back and forth.
Yeah, emails, that's why you almost always see a please don't reply all on an email from the city.
And if we get an email, often we'll send it to Jen, so she can send it to everybody that's on the council.
Yeah, so purely information is fine. So like there'll be an occasion where I send out an email, just like the council should be aware of X, Y, and Z. And I send it out to the council for informational purposes only. I will ask council not to reply all. You can talk to me about it, or you're sending information out. I believe that the council should know about this. It is a one-way transmission of information. That is fine. It is
deliberation or discussion. It is multiple people chiming in and sharing opinions and having a discussion that should be had in public. That's what the law is designed to do. You know, does it snare more than it should? Probably. But that situation is fine.
Actually, I worked in some state, I think it was Idaho, where they had a strict law, or they wouldn't allow you to even poll in preparation for the deliberation. So you
Right.
couldn't poll on an issue. Is that in Oregon? I haven't heard it brought up. You know?
You have to be careful. So, yeah, a lot of times, you know, government still needs to function, I would say, among all of these laws. And so I would say that it is totally fine for somebody to pull members of the council. Where you run the risk is cross-contamination. So, you know, when you're taking a poll, are you sharing, you know, what the results of the poll up to that point? Or are you saying, you know, how are you going to vote on this issue? Here's what Robin thinks. Or, you know, again, I'm very cautious of that. Have I adjusted what I'm telling people from the other conversations that I've gotten? So let's say that there's like a legal issue that I want to have a conversation with each counselor with, you know, I will write out a script. Like, this is what I'm sharing with each one of the counselors. So everybody's getting the exact same piece of information. I'm not cross-contaminating, and I'm also not adjusting based on other questions. So yes, you can poll, but also, yes, you should be pretty careful about how you do it.
So when you send out information to the counselors, do you send it separately or do you send it as a group?
I send it as a group. So the typical practice.
But just do not reply all.
Do not reply all. And, you know, that's how Bruce does it too. Bruce, you know, all the counselors need, you know, X, Y, and Z information. He'll send it out. And I am not aware of there being an issue at Cannon Beach of counselors responding. Maybe it's, you know, the gravity of this presentation a couple times over again where people know not to reply all, but I have not seen that as an issue here at all.
They do pretty good. Yeah, you don't reply all.
So any other questions? I think so the conflicts of interest, abuse of office, and the issues around prohibited public meetings, those are sort of my high priority topics for this sort of presentation. So any other questions before I move on? Okay. I don't think that you need to know a ton about public records. Yep.
Please tell us.
What was that? Oh, wait. Clay, do you still have your hand up, or is that residual? I think it's okay.
No,
Okay, I don't think he does. Okay.
Actually, I did have one quick question.
Yeah.
So trying to phrase this correctly. So in a case where an email goes out to the committee and you want to respond, and what ends up happening is that email train gets put in the packet. It becomes public. Is that sufficient to?
Yeah, I mean, what I will say is that a technical violation probably occurred, you know, through that email chain, if it was deliberation. But, you know, is it cured by putting in the public packet? I would argue that, yes, it was still a violation, but any damage done by that is rectified by it being made public. So does that answer your question?
Mike Bates emailed me a question.
Yeah.
He asked, what is delegation?
Well, that's a really good question. Do you know what context you mean with that?
No, they just questioned regarding public meeting and what is delegation?
So I'm going to go ahead and guess that's about forming subcommittees. So what is a delegation to a subcommittee that makes that subcommittee a public body? I'm going to guess that's where he's going. And there's no bright line rule about that. You know, my preference is, you know, some sort of written resolution that delegates authority to these 3 members of council to do X, Y, and Z. That is a very clean delegation of authority. When they're doing that, they're very clearly acting within their scope as, you know, the subcommittee. It can also just be a motion, you know, like I delegate authority to these 2 people to negotiate the city manager contract. You know, that does become a subcommittee. But that is in a proper delegation of authority. It can also be delegated through adoption of policies. So everything in your, whether or not does a department head, the city manager have authority to take X, Y, and Z action, it can be delegated through your personnel handbooks, can be delegated through job descriptions. There's any number of ways, both formal and informal, to delegate authority. So I hope that answers his question. We'll see.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So what Les was referring to with the email, and then if it's not quite technically okay, that you put it in the packet and that kind of corrects, sort of, but you wouldn't want to use that as a practice.
No.
No.
I mean, best practice is to deliberate in public.
Yeah.
But again, what you're asking about is like, do volunteers make mistakes? Yes, we're all busy people. And, there's no intention to do something outside of the public eye. And so, yes, it could be a violation, but the damage has been rectified. And so I'm not going to say it's not a big deal, but the damage is pretty limited.
Okay, I heard back from Mike. He says, what if members less than a quorum decide to discuss changes to code regarding land use on their own?
Not a delegation. So in that case, like, let's say that you are having some cocktails with your friend and you guys are talking about something that you're later going to bring back to the commission that you're on. Nobody has delegated authority to do anything. You're just having some really good ideas going back and forth over some martinis. That is fine. If there is some sort of official delegation, then you need to be careful.
Clay just raised his hand.
Like,
Can you hear me okay?
yes.
Great. So this kind of goes along the lines of Mike's question. I just want to make sure I'm clear. If, let's say, the Planning Commission passes a resolution to form a subcommittee on a particular item, and we have a 7-member commission and we delegate 3 people to that subcommittee, does that subcommittee then, are they subject to rules of public notice if 2 out of 3 get together, or are they not subject to public notice if only 3 out of a 7-member greater panel get together?
Great question. And the answer is, if they have been delegated authority, they are an independent subcommittee of the Planning Commission that is subject to the Oregon Public Meetings laws. So if 2 of you get together and deliberate on that topic, then that is a public meeting that needs to be noticed.
Well, okay, so then let's just talk practically for a minute. There are some issues that, because of public notice, there's concern it won't happen as quickly as there needs to be some ideas. If 3 members of the Planning Commission get together and talk about it and informally come back to the Planning Commission with a couple of ideas at a formal meeting, is that okay?
That would be fine if there has been no delegation of authority for that subcommittee to make a recommendation to the commission.
Okay. Okay.
I think like we're going into some technical areas, and I think that's fine. I think it's important to recognize, like, what is the purpose? The purpose is that, yes, government needs to function, and sometimes individual conversations of less than a quorum need to happen. But for groups of people that have the ability on their own to be a voting bloc that makes a recommendation that could later become public policy, all of those discussions should be in public. And that's what the law is designed to do. And again, laws are imperfect, and it does snare a lot of situations that could potentially slow down the public function. But, the weight here is in favor of transparency over speed.
Yeah, it's also just the burden on the city right now. I mean, there's so many items in front of the city that, while we have some critically important items that need to be addressed, we also have some monstrous undertakings that have, as you said at the beginning of the meeting, absolutely tapped our city council and the Planning Commission. And it's, it comes down to kind of how do we practically get this done? And not trying to hide anything, but just trying to how to work within a system that is tapped right now and doesn't have either the bandwidth from time from each member's personal standpoint to just the process. You know, we have so many things in front of us right now.
Yes. I mean,
So
I
what
would,
you've given me is really helpful. It'll help me navigate through it.
thank you. That was the goal for this
Go
evening is to sort of shine some light on this. And yeah, I mean, these laws, they were formed in 1974, 1976, you know, on the heels of Watergate. And they weigh very heavily in favor of transparency. And I totally get it. I mean, a lot of the issues that I deal with on a day-to-day basis are, you know, how do we get this done in a way that makes sense? And it is hard when your council meets 8 to 10 times a month, which is astounding. So you do have a lot of opportunities to do business, but I understand what you're saying. I think we have a question from Anita.
Yes, hello. I'm wondering who has jurisdictions over any violations regarding any meeting between two committee members or just a community citizen, and how that would go forward in being discovered and dealt with.
That's a great question. So executive sessions are dealt with under the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. So violations of executive session go to the Oregon Government Ethics Commission and they deal with it. Violations of Oregon public meetings laws do not. So those would go to circuit court.
Okay, but I guess I'm trying to get to the point of, you know, so you've got some committee members that have an agenda item that they know is coming up, and to be able to discuss that seems like a prudent way to be able to publicly meet within chambers and make a decision. So I mean, at what point does, you know, somebody say, well, you had a unethical meeting between three of you just to discuss it? I mean, how is the discovery actually determined for ethics?
I mean, it's the normal litigation process. So yeah, so in that case, it would be a member of the public filing the lawsuit and then, you know, normal discovery process. But I think what your question actually is frustration about not being able to have preliminary discussions before a public meeting. Yeah. And I do think that there is a balance here, and it's whether or not those discussions involve a voting block that could pass a recommendation or a decision without those decisions being in public. So, you know, members of the city council, 2 members can talk about whatever they want. They can talk about anything in front of the Robin and Nancy can go to each other's house and talk all night long about things that have to do with the city. They can hash out issues. They can have those discussions. The issue is if they involve a 3rd member and they become a voting block, and then all of the discussions that lead to the decision happen outside of the public eye. So I think that is the balance, is that it can't involve a quorum. It can't involve a voting block.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
And I think that one of the dangers of today's age, especially with Zoom and Facebook and all these new media that we have, is the dangers of if 2 members are recording something, you know, or in a meeting of another committee or whatever, and those 2 members are on, and you know, and the quorums, and then you watch that, or you do your Facebook stuff and comment on these things. That's where the dangers, I think, of the world we live in now, of these inadvertent quorums, you know, kind of the polling of really decisions in the future take place. And I think that that's the worry I have as a staff, and how these things are starting to accumulate out there. So
yeah. I mean, I think Jeff makes a really good point, and that's why we're sort of waiting for some sort of legislative fix or legislative update, because these laws were drafted, you know, 20 or 30 years ago when we did not Zoom, we did not have Facebook, you know, email wasn't around. So I do think that
then an update is necessary for exactly those reasons. These are really great questions. I don't want to cut anybody off. Before I move on, any more? Okay. I seem to have lost my PowerPoint. I think I pressed too many buttons. But the last topic that I wanted to cover was public records. And again, you're not responding to public records requests, so you don't need to know the ins and outs of this. What you do need to know is that any recording of the city business is considered a public record, no matter the media that it's on. So if you are texting about city business, that is officially a public record. If you are sending emails about the city's business, that is a public record. And the city could get a public records request for, and we do routinely, like all communications to and from members of this commission regarding this topic. And in that case, Jen is going to email you or call you and say, I need you to produce all of your text messages or all of your social media posts or all of your emails regarding this topic. Those are public records. That means that you have to save them. They are subject to Oregon public records retention requirements. And so if you choose to do public business via text messages, via social media, via your personal email account, you also need to be able to provide those records to the city so they can retain them. As public officials, the easiest way to do this is to do everything on your email, your city email account. If you're doing everything on your city email account, you don't need to worry about this issue. And it's very easy for us to respond to public records requests without you having to go through, your personal email, your Facebook or so forth to get all of those records. So as board of commissioners, that's the high level public records takeaway, is that the definition of a public record is very expansive. It includes, not just, paper, it includes emails, any sort of media that record your work as a city official, and that you need to keep those, and you may have to provide those to a public records request.
Is there a time frame?
During the records retention period, so it is different regarding the type of the substance of the record. So, I would send it to the city and let the city assist with retaining those records on the appropriate schedule.
So the city council is the only one that has a city email.
Mhm.
Okay.
So that is a really good point. I would develop a Gmail account specific for your role as a board and commissioner. So it's very easy just to do like a Ashley Driscoll Planning Commission Gmail account and have all the information go to that Gmail account. You can even get that forwarded to your normal email account. And so you don't have to go and check it, but you have all of those emails in one place. All right, so I am just short of my promise, 90 minutes, but really good questions. Anything else that I can help answer? Nope. Okay.
I just want to say thank you.
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Sorry about the beginning. That's not happening. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm talking to you. Actually, during tax.
Oh, wait, you're right here. Right, we won't, don't worry. Yeah.